We're going to take you out of that live briefing by Premier Panyaza Lesufi. There it is, the State of the Province address there. He is at the end of the speech there, just, talking about thanking also, the people, all the stakeholders that are actually assisting in taking the province forward. Then also just saying that the whole speech is for all the parties that are part of the government of national unity there. Quite a lot of issues he touched on. I'm going to dissect that with my guests. Spoke about power failures that need to be a thing of the past, the issue of crime in the province, saying that, there's a deployment of CCTV cameras and quite a lot of issues there. Let me bring in my guest this evening as we are coming to you live. Nkululeko, Sibiya, media analyst, and Trevor, Ngwane, socialist and author, just joining us in studio this evening as we unpack the speech more. Let me welcome you both to Soweto TV News. Much appreciated for coming in.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, Ngwane, let me start with you. The question that comes into mind is, has the speech inspired confidence? Some of the things that we heard from the Premier, we've heard them before. Now he's saying that, look, reflecting on the interventions and also some of the things that, they are planning to do, has it really inspired confidence from what you've heard?
Well, look, it was long and detailed, and it was a long list of, the 13 problems.
Yeah.
It was sounding like the biblical litany of pestilences. And then I was thinking at least a quarter of them were caused by the ANC, like load shedding, water problems. It's all happening under the watch of the ANC government. But you can talk about that later. My general view and my concern was that it tended to be top-down solutions. Yeah, for example, I work a lot with people who fight crime on the ground in the township in Soweto, the patrollers. So he didn't talk about the patrollers, ordinary men and women who wake up at 4 a.m. every day. He talked about some big business people who provided money for CCTV. And I also thought of, the Reconstruction and Development Program of old, RDP, where Mandela said, development must be people-driven, must be people-centered. But I couldn't find the people anywhere in the speech as actors. Of course, as spectators and as receivers of development. So that is my concern. So I think that maybe the Premier needs to be more participatory and more trying to empower people to address their own problems.
Nkululeko, let me bring you to this discussion. As part of the 13 key things that the Premier spoke about, I think the first thing that he started with was the water crisis.
Yes,
Firstly, apologizing to the residents there. What do you make of, are the promises clear, or he was tiptoeing on the issue?
Look, he spoke about our power stations, power generation, right, handing it over to ESCOM as well as
City Power.
City Power. So those are some of the solutions that I would think that those who are around the problem have identified that they may come with solutions. But as the Premier is speaking about what they're going to do, I think implicitly he admits to the failures. He spoke about vandalism. If you were on top of your job, you wouldn't have the vandalism that is happening there in the first place. So, and again, look, he does admit that there was a delay in tackling the aging infrastructure and all of that. Look, we are waiting to see. He spoke about the Lesotho water project and all of that. We know those are the things that already have been spoken about at national level and all of that stuff. What we want to see as residents of this province is implementation, you know, and solutions, because at the moment we are dealing with the throttling of water, so we are dealing with water shedding in effect. And when you wake up in townships mostly, you find that there's leaking water almost every day, everywhere, the sewer and all of that. So maybe it's an issue of implementation, right, and us seeing the solutions. But it's a multifaceted problem. Like you heard, where are the people participating? Remember when we spoke earlier before the speech, I spoke about education and people themselves realizing that we are a water scarce nation. You know, so what is their role? We can fix all the infrastructure, but when the people, you know, are able to understand the public good, where it comes from, how to use it, then you start getting better solutions around that problem.
Ngwane, let me bring you to this. I mean, what were some of the key takeouts? I mean, he did speak about being on track with dealing with criminal activities, lawlessness in the province in general. Are we really on track? Because, you know, criminals seem to be running amok. I mean, you would see the cash in transits, the videos that have been happening, that we've been seeing on social media, you know, hijackings, all these things that are happening also in the inner city. Quite a lot of issues. Are we really on track, or these are just promises but with no capacity to deal with them?
Only the other week in Pimville, where I live in Soweto, they bombed an ATM, FNB ATM, and they shot an innocent bystander. Can you see? So that's the problem, because from the point of view of ordinary people, not much is changing. But even if you use statistics, 48% of hijackings happen in Gauteng, okay? There might be some improvements from police statistics, but that's about half the country's hijackings are happening in Gauteng. 22% of the murders in South Africa are happening in Gauteng. So I don't think that the Premier needs what we can call a gradual, step-by-step solution. He needs something real big, because this is a crisis. So at the same time, I did think that he tends to fall into the trap of quantitative rather than qualitative. So, you know, he gives all these big figures, big money, but the question is, how will the infrastructure program be implemented? Will there be corruption? Will there be kickbacks? Will there be community participation? You know, so, you know, yes, quantity, but also quality, yes.
Ngwane, we're going to park it there. My guest this evening, Nkululeko Sibiya, media analyst, and Trevor Ngwane, socialist and author, as we dissect the State of the Province address, which, as I believe, is now concluded by Premier Panyaza Lesufi there in Pretoria. We're going to take a quick ad break. We're coming back to dissect more after the ad break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching the special broadcast of the State of the Province address. My name is Thabo Molokoane. We are coming to you live this evening as we are unpacking more on what the Premier spoke about in terms of some of the promises, and also what is it that they are hoping to achieve in this administration. Let me bring in my guests. They're still with me this evening, Nkululeko Sibiya, media analyst, and Trevor Ngwane, who is a socialist and author there, just dissecting more on this. I just want to maybe reflect on the issue of human settlements. Maybe you'll also get in there, Nkululeko. But Trevor, I mean, you spoke about, you know, the speech being detached, you know, especially to people on the ground. It didn't speak about an ordinary Sowetan, Alex, you know, people from Mamelodi, yes, they did touch on various points there that we are here and we want to do this, but initially it was not people-centered, if I may put it that way. In terms of human settlement, people have been complaining about issues of housing. We've been seeing also shack fires and people moved to low-cost housing. And then the people from various communities would also complain that we've been waiting for houses, but they are not there. What are we getting wrong as a province in order to address the issue of human settlements? I know it's a national issue.
Well, basically, South Africa is, a post-apartheid society. Apartheid was a form of racial capitalism, which means that all the wealth, all the resources, all the housing, all the development ended up in few hands.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it was white hands. So the ANC government has not been able to implement a massive program of redistribution. So, for example, you find black people, especially the working class and the poor, they're still trapped in apartheid geography. Orange Farm, 40 kilometers away from the city center. Soweto, 20 or 15 kilometers away from the city center. So not enough has been done. I'm not saying that this must be done by the Premier Lesufi. I'm just saying that his party has not had the drive, the vision, and the courage to face up to big capital and actually claim the country in real terms and not just tinker around the edges. Yes, we want township economy, but the money is in Sandton. Can you see? Yeah. So it's the same with housing. So he's got this big project of 81,000 houses. And then for Macau, Germiston, which is a community I know, he's got 4,000 houses. I don't think there'll be enough, but yes. But if you look at the scale of homelessness, and he's proud, he's going out, putting down shacks, land invasion.
Yeah.
But the land invaders, the occupiers, are homeless people, are human beings, are working class people, are poor people. An ordinary township guy, if he or she hears, hey, there's some land there, they get excited. At last, I'm going to have a place of my own. For the Premier is a problem. It needs to be crushed. So he's out of touch with the needs of the ordinary people.
Nkululeko, maybe if you can touch on that point also. I mean, he spoke about releasing sites for people, saying that, look, we've acquired land, and also they're fighting the issue of informal settlements, as Ngwane has said there. But is it realistic? I mean, the issue of redistribution seems to be a major problem, especially for the I would say the ANC-led government, but now it's the government of national unity, with the Land Expropriation Act also being signed to law. Will we get it right?
I think it's a moving target. Housing is always a moving target, right? The more you supply houses, what happens is an influx of people, so the city is growing. So you'll never completely get to that utopian point where you say you've satisfied everyone or the problem. But the Ikageng project, it has a bit of the DA proposal, I think, earlier, where the DA was suggesting that no longer build houses, just give people land. Maybe that is something that's coming through the GNU, but you also cannot really, it's not tangible that is a GNU thing, because the Premier also wanted to sound ANC, that this is an ANC government. So let's see. He mentioned 101,000 beneficiaries of this Ikageng project. Build for yourself. The hostel dwellers. I mean, it sounded like he's presenting a new thing. We knew a long time ago that hostels were male dominated, but as we entered democracy, those pieces started changing. There were many field projects of trying to convert these hostel dwellings where we found them vandalized, people not occupying them. So I wanted to hear how differently they were going to deliver this new gentrification of these hostels, Yes, we are happy with the Wi-Fi and all of that. I think one of the other concerns for me is the number of times the Premier mentioned private sector, because he's talking about surveillance cameras that come from private sector. Who owns that content on there, and how private is our privacy again? You know, those questions, you know, in as much as we want to solve the crime and all of that,
Yeah.
we can't be a surveillance state. I think there's a lot of that where we see the Premier being a techno-determinist, you know.
Yeah.
He thinks that technology will solve everything, and that it's fine, that it's private sector, private sector, private sector. I want to go back and count the number of times that private sector has been mentioned, because it seems like in every solution, even the housing, private sector is there to play a huge role. So it seems like government in itself is not confident enough to say, we are government, we can distribute our money, we can solve the problems of our people.
My guest this evening, Nkululeko Sibiya, media analyst, and Trevor, Ngwane, socialist and author, joining me as we are unpacking the State of the Province address by Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi. Quite a lot of issues, quite a lot of bold promises there. We are dissecting them. When we come back after the ad break, we look at the solutions now. How does the province move forward? Quite a lot of issues that we did not touch on, but I believe my guests will also unpack them for us. Unemployment, the issue of failing infrastructure, solutions. We need solutions as the province needs to move ahead. Let's take a quick ad break. We're coming back after this. Welcome back. You're still watching the special broadcast of the State of the Province address by Premier Panyaza Lesufi. My name is Thabo Molokoane. I'm still with my guest this evening, Nkululeko Sibiya, media analyst, and Trevor, Ngwane, socialist and author, as we dissect this speech. Gentlemen, as we wrap up the conversation, solutions now are needed to take the province forward. The issues of unemployment, I mean, he promised the jobs that are over 800,000, and also looking at the issue of the failing infrastructure, healthcare facilities. It's a mess in this province. I mean, we've heard the challenges people raising there. What is needed? Let me start with you, Ngwane.
Yeah, so, this thing of which Nkululeko was talking about, always the private sector, always the private sector. But the private sector is not a panacea, is not a solution to all problems. For example, the private sector, just as it creates employment, it also creates unemployment. The Premier said, ArcelorMittal just closed down in Sibiya. He didn't mention that ArcelorMittal also closed down in Newcastle. When I grew up in KZN, ISCO was where everyone worked if you lived, in that part, of the Midlands. Under the ANC watch, it closes down. But the same Premier who talks about that believes that that same private sector is going to bring jobs. I think that given the Premier's, I think he's got that desire to change things. He's known as the mover and shaker Premier, because other Premiers, let's be honest, are sleeping. So sleeping on the job. So I think that he should think more about maybe creating a provincial state company, to build houses, retracting. So this thing of private sector means outsourcing, contracting out work. Work should be done by government departments. So he must strengthen state capacity so that there's no middleman who slices off the profit. Because with these contracts, these tenders, 10%, 20%, 30%, sometimes even 50% ends up being pocket for some capitalists. So I think he should go back to his SACP roots, communist roots, and push state-driven development.
Nkululeko, the issue of the Limpopo-Gauteng-based, speed train, he spoke about it, and the effectiveness, or rather, the challenges that are faced by municipalities in order to deliver services, did touch on it, also trying to find solutions on how to address those issues. What do you make of these promises?
Look, I think any person or child who doesn't dream will die, So we have to credit our leadership, for dreaming and having these desires of delivering us into a quote-unquote first world country, or, the challenge is that, and if you look at Polokwane, for instance, Polokwane does need a bullet train. You know, the migration to Polokwane every weekend is massive, right? You also need that type of infrastructure going down to Durban and all of those places. It's just that the way our state is set up, it is such that he premised his speech on a developmental state.
Yeah.
We've been trying to be a developmental state, right? And then we see these projects under the setup of this democratic government where it cannot command, you know, these programs into being. So we can only hope that we will see them one day. I mean, the Gauteng has been a revolution for the Gauteng resident. I mean, if I get out now and say I'm going to be in Pretoria in 20 minutes, that's the reality.
Yeah.
However, we can't then say it's Gauteng 20 years and then we wait another 30 years for the next project to happen. If you look at countries like China, they build a hospital now. In a month, a whole hospital is up. We, on the other hand, we are still trapped in this situation where we have to plan, you know, on end for these things to be realized. So, yes, in terms of those solutions, and it can change the economy of Polokwane, connecting it much better to Gauteng. So, look, we didn't have timelines, for instance, of when is that going to happen and all of that stuff. Another example, for instance, when he mentioned that, you know, the Chinese are calling on people who produce rooibos and all of that. It's great, but who are those industrialists in this country? You know, again, you're not saying, hey, maybe we're going to, you know, reserve that call for these people. This is how we're going to upskill young people to be those producers of those things. You know, he's only looking for people who are already producing those things. You know, it's so sad to then think that we will then start having young people trying to run and set up these companies, yet it's for established companies that are running those things.
And as we close off the conversation, the issue of lifestyle audits also came into play, you know, when he spoke, saying that, look, we need to be able, anyone who is hired or deployed needs to, you know, there needs to be a lifestyle audit for that person. Are you confident it's going to work? I mean, we've heard the word lifestyle audits for the past few years, but we do not see, you know, the purpose for it. People are not accounting to, you know, wasteful expenditure or, you know, every time you hear about it, but nothing is happening. Just in closing, are you confident it's going to happen?
I don't think lifestyle audit is going to help anyone because the ANC has become what I can call a boss's party, a bourgeois party. So it listens to white monopoly capital, and then it listens to the aspirant black bourgeoisie. It has forgotten about the working class and the poor. So when people are in position, when people become politicians, they are looking at self-enrichment, self-aggrandizement. So the ANC has lost its way. And I think, you know, the only way it can go is down, you know, unless it changes drastically and follow, let's say, the path of socialism, but not socialism from above, you know, but from below.
Let me thank you both for coming in this evening. It was quite an insightful post-analysis there. Thank you very much, Ngwane, Nkululeko, for coming in. We hope to have you on the show again sometime. That's how we've come to the end of the special broadcast of the State of the Province address by Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi. My guest this evening were Nkululeko Sibiya, media analyst, Trevor Ngwane, who is a socialist and author, just unpacking quite a lot of issues that they touched on there. Until then, let's meet again on Soweto TV News. It's good night from us. Thank you for watching.